Well, every year, hope springs eternal.
That's what we were just talking about. One Vikings win, and now we're all away.
Good evening, everyone. Before we have the regular council meeting, we're going to have a brief or a quick Economic Development Authority meeting. So I call to order the Economic Development Authority meeting for September 25th, 2017. Kelly, if you would, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Twice a year, we will have an EDA meeting in order to consider the proposed levy related to the City Hall bonds that were issued in 2014. So for the meeting tonight, we just have a few items. We have approval of the minutes from December 12, 2016 would be the first item. And then the next items relate to adopting the levy for 2018.
Okay, Council, if there's no discussion, can we have a motion to approve the minutes and adopt the levy? I'm sorry. Real quick point. Do we have to do this through a motion on the EDA?
We do. Two separate motions. First, to approve the minutes, and then if you'd like, Kelly can give a little bit more information on the levy before that motion.
Perfect, thank you. Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes from 12/12/16?
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain. I was not in that meeting. All opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing none, it passed 4-0. One abstention. So, Kelly, next item.
Okay, the next item is a resolution to approve the special HRA levy of $188,000 for debt service on the EDA limited tax bonds that were issued in 2014. This is the amount that we levy each year according to the bond documents. So what we'd be looking for is just a motion to approve that resolution.
Council, any discussion?
A question, Kelly. Various times we always contemplate refunding various bonds, and I think this is one of the ones that, given the right timing and interest rates, et cetera, would lend itself to that. So curious where we are with that, what the timeline is, and what the potential is for that.
Okay. Certainly we would look for refunding on this if we can, just because we had a slightly higher bond rate on this because the bond rating for the city was rated one notch lower because they were issued through the EDA and had a different revenue structure. They have a 5-year call date on them, so it'd be 2019 would be the earliest date that we could refund. So hopefully tax rate or interest rates will stay low, and in 2019 we can refund these.
What about advance refunding? How far in advance can that process be started?
I believe we could look into that. Typically, for something like this, it doesn't make sense if you do it too early because you have to essentially pay interest on both sets of bonds until the date of the call date would arrive. But I can check with our municipal advisor and see if it might make sense to look at doing this earlier if we think that interest rates are going to be rising before 2019 and we want to lock in an interest rate before that would happen.
What are rates generally doing today?
The rate we got on the 15-year bonds that we just did for the 2017 AA street improvements had a true interest cost of about, I think it was 2.25%, which compares to the 1.81% we were getting the year before when rates were at a very low point. So they seem to be trending up a little bit.
And the bonds for these bonds that we're speaking of here, what's the rate on those? Do you recall?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I'd guess it's probably in the 2 to 3% range, but I can
If
check
you can
on
just
that.
bring that back for us at a future
Sure.
meeting, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Council, further comments? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution approving a special HRA tax levy of $188,000 for debt service on EDA limited tax lease revenue bonds Series 2014A for collection in 2018.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That passes unanimously. At this point, can I have a motion to adjourn the EDA meeting?
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
I'll second that.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The EDA meeting is adjourned. At this point, I call to order the regular City of Victoria Council meeting for September 25th. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Lori, any changes on the agenda? Council?
I would like to, I don't know, make a motion to just return things as they were. And this is a little bit of a response to some of the conversation at the last council meeting. And by that, I mean return the reports of the council to the back end of the agenda where they've always been, and also to return those to a discussion format, which it had always been, so that all members speak, comment, question, whatever, discuss any item that's brought up during any reports, and also to return the open forum to the format that it has always been, which is well, I'll just read it from the agenda statement, an opportunity for citizens to discuss with the council. So, in other words, an opportunity for the council to interact with any speakers who choose to approach the podium.
Council? Discussion?
And related to that, where was I going with that? There's one item on here about how we set the agenda, and I guess I would add to that, I'd like to go back to how we set the agenda previously, and that was done in an open and transparent fashion, that yes, anybody can propose an agenda item, but it's not meant to be an attack on others. And to the extent that we're all here to do good for the city, I don't think we need a policy for that, and I'd move to strike that. But my concern is that's not what it's been since we started in January.
Where is that item? I don't see it on there.
Well, it was on there, wasn't it? What we're going to talk about agenda? The agenda policy is that under your?
It was on a previous council agenda. I did not include it on this evening's.
Well, I would propose we add it then to talk about it from that perspective. And I will make sure I update my iPad next time.
I don't have a problem adding that agenda item. Lori, do we have things that we need to provide to the public if we're going to add that item? There's no staff report available here.
I don't think so. We've had items published at previous meetings if we want to refer to them, but I would defer to the council.
And I'm happy to have that pulled and put it on another day, but I guess in the end what I'm asking is it's really no change as to what it has been for over 6 years, and that is anybody can put something up, but it's about the betterment of Victoria and not trying to attack another council member. To the extent that we keep it to that, I don't think we need to change how things are put on the agenda.
I don't want to get into the discussion here because we're talking about modifying the agenda. For the sake of simplicity, Councilmember Crowley, would you have any objections if we add that into the next meeting? Then we can have a discussion on that.
On those, that's fine.
Okay.
Alternatively, we could just do it as a report at the end and just have some discussion.
Let's go to the report then.
Okay. The other item you brought up is in the open forum. In all the years that I've been watching the council and participating, I don't recall any time where the standard process has been for the council to engage anybody that speaks during the open forum. And what I think I heard you say is that you want to go back to that way of doing it, but I don't understand that was the way it was done ever before.
Well, I'd like to add a little bit more to that.
Please do.
I'd like to go back to the decorum that was previous. And I felt that, especially in the last council meeting, some of the things that were presented absolutely warranted responses, and they were beyond the decorum of this session, and they should not be allowed. And I would respectfully request that the mayor restrict those statements, borderline, if not over the edge, defamatory. It's unacceptable.
So, sorry, are you?
I'm done.
I guess to respond to the original question, that was in fact always, the open forum always was a discussion, or at least an opportunity for discussion. The mayor always asked if there was any comments or questions from any of the council while the speaker was at the podium. It wasn't always common to that there was some questions, but there was always the opportunity. And that's what I'm asking that's the motion that I made, is that we refer to that, return to that opportunity to have dialogue.
All right, further, go ahead.
As a former speaker at that podium, I often found that previous councils were not always that considerate of the members at the podium, oftentimes interrupted them in a rude fashion, and quite frankly, just weren't very courteous to them. So interacting is one thing, but interrupting to try to somehow denigrate them in some way is not acceptable.
I guess I would agree with you, Councilmember Gregory, and that's where my previous comment about decorum is bidirectional. I agree completely, and I think we need to enforce that.
So interrupting speakers is not okay, and I'm afraid if we allow interaction, that's what it will become.
And I would like to add that there's clearly inflamed passions on both sides of the issues that this council faces. And as part of that, I really do not want to try to stifle residents' opinions, although there's things that have approached possibly crossing that line. That's a hard line to try to define in any sort of measured way. I know there have been times where I've asked speakers to tone it down, and there's times when I've given speakers on both sides of an issue extra time. And so I'm trying to be fair and balanced in that entire approach. I don't think that we need any changes. I think the council should not interact because we end up getting into discussions on something that's not on the agenda, and there may be other residents that would like to participate. And if we're going to get into discussions, it really needs to be an agenda item and set so that all residents have the ability to come in and speak to it if they want. Council, further discussions?
Yes. Mr. Mayor, at the last council meeting, there was someone in the open forum who spoke and actually accused me of slandering Councilman Gregory at the August 28th meeting, making fun of his handicap. Or I don't know what this person was trying to say. His name was Stefano. He's not here today, but he actually accused me of saying something derogatory to Councilman Gregory. And then he had the audacity to tell everyone in the room to go to the August 28th meeting and look at 10 minutes, 29 seconds into the meeting, or 10 minutes, 30 seconds into the meeting. So I'm inviting everyone here to go back to your laptop, go to the August 28th meeting, go to about 10 minutes and 29 seconds, and see if you can find out what I did that warranted him accusing me of attacking Councilman Gregory in a derogatory manner. Basically, he said you'd have to play it back.
Could I weigh in on that?
Yes, I was trying to talk to you about that before the meeting, but the speakers were on.
The way I took Councilman Vogt's comment, it certainly wasn't related in any way, shape, or form to my disability. But he was questioning whether I had the ability to bring the motion forward all by myself. I think that's what you were getting.
Yeah, I was referring to the 100 pages of text that was sent to us over the weekend, that your motion involved 100 pages of legalese from a certain lawyer. So I was just referring to, sorry, no.
My motion did not include the 100-page legalese. My motion and everything that I presented was documents that had already been presented at previous meetings. The document that everybody keeps talking about is this affidavit that was sent to me as a surprise. It had relatively little to go with my discussion at the previous council meeting.
But can we play what the
No,
comments that were
it's really
made
not.
by
That's really
Stefano?
not. He interpreted it differently, and
I'd say
it could have, and it.
basically he slandered me in front of the
Well,
city of
if we want to
Victoria.
get into discussing what other speakers talked about last meeting, Ms. Black, in reference to my motion, was very sarcastic and directed at me that I didn't know what I was talking about when I was speaking about the Minnesota Lawyers Professional Responsibility Board in reference that all you had to do was call the board and they would tell you everything you wanted. And of course, that wasn't true, was it? So it's
So, folks, let's.
So we're not going to get into this.
The whole point of my
going after.
comment was that we need decorum, and now, I mean,
That would be
just
good.
discussing this, we're losing our decorum, and that's where I come back. Mayor, you're the parliamentarian. I ask you to try to control this better and keep, you have my word that I'm going to try to do so. I need your help. I want everybody on this council to try to do so, and if someone gets up and starts to do things like that again, we should have the ability to, in a nice way, stop it.
I wouldn't argue with the concept of that. If somebody approaches that line or I think crosses that line, I'll be more than happy to gavel that down.
Can we raise a point of order? How can we bring this to your attention if we think there's a problem? How could we do this in a respectful manner that would allow us to engage?
I think you just simply could simply call out, Mayor, I think that's over the line, and then I'll go ahead and gavel that individual down.
Thank you.
So I don't have any problem with this, and I think this is a healthy discussion. There's clearly 2 points again on this. So we're back on the agenda. Let me recap to make sure I have this right. I'm not hearing any changes to the agenda, but I am hearing that you want to discuss, or did you actually make a motion that we change the open forum so that we can react or interact, rather, with residents? Is that what you'd like to see done?
I made a motion to return the reports to the end of the meeting where they've traditionally been, and to return to the tradition of allowing discussion both of all the reports and of comments that any speaker may make at the podium. And those have been the traditions in the 6 years I was on this council prior to January of this year. And I think, again, in the context of healthy discussion, I think we can all agree that we're grown-ups and we ought to be able to handle these conversations with respect and dignity. And I don't think squelching that is the right way to return to that.
All right, Council, any further comments?
Again, I'll reiterate my comments. I think it's a bad idea to interact with residents during open forum. Those are items that are not on the agenda, and those discussions are going to get off track in a big hurry. If you do decide to do that, I would hope that the council would allow members at the podium to speak their piece without being interrupted. Once they're finished, if you feel you need to interact, that would be the time after they finish their statement.
So I want to clarify, Councilmember Strigo, what you're intending here. When you're talking about interacting, are you talking about just the reports at the end of the meeting, or are you also including the open forum and interacting with residents during the open forum? Are you including both or just one?
Both. Thank you.
All right. So we have a valid motion on the table. Is there any further comment?
I would agree with Councilman Gregory's recommendation that if people come up, they're allowed to speak their piece, but they will know that if they say something crazy, that somebody from the city council might take issue with what they're saying and respond to them. And so we could probably have a much more civilized discussion. And so I agree with Councilman Gregory that somebody comes up here, they say what they want to say and complete their 5 minutes. That's the other problem we've had is the 8 minute, 5 minute stretch. So, but I agree with the motion also that we should do this and then put some constraints on it because we obviously have some experience.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second on that motion? Was there a second made on that?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Nay. Motion passes 3-2. Next item is then the open forum. Judy Black.
Is there a question? I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mayor, could you clarify, was that a motion to adopt the agenda as also including modifications?
Right, including the modifications.
Okay, thank you.
So for clarity, the reports are back where they normally are. They can be discussion during the reports, and there can be discussion during the open forum. Council, any objection? Did I interpret that correctly?
That is correct.
All right.
And
Yes.
I think we try it, right? And if it doesn't work, we can change it back.
Judy Black. By the way, we've now moved to the open forum. Name and address for the record, please.
Judy Black, 1938 Woodstone Drive. I want to start off tonight by correcting a statement I made at the last meeting regarding the Lawyers Professional Responsibility Board. While on their site researching how to file a complaint about Mr. Kildall's possible misconduct of Rule 4.2, I mistakenly thought the process was the same for the lawyers as well. That is, until Mr. Goulard was kind enough to direct me to the correct page, showing the process for lawyers are indeed different. So apologies for that. I also apologize to Mr. Goulard for making him feel impugned by my questions to Professor Painter asking for clarification. And obviously I need to apologize to Councilmember Gregory as well because I didn't realize I was being sarcastic. So I'm sorry about that. I wasn't going to mention Professor Painter's declaration tonight, but Mr. Goulard insisted. There is a clear misunderstanding on my part of Professor Painter's paragraph beginning with his opinion of Mr. Voss's conflict. That's why I wrote the professor. He has chosen to speak to me through Mr. Goulard, who wrote in the comments section of my petition for a Victoria page on Facebook and explained that the appeal was referring to the cross appeal by the defendants and not their appeal. The declaration merely stated the appeal, and since the only appeal pending is theirs, I understood it to mean theirs. If I'm wrong, my apologies for that as well. There was no attempt on my part to intentionally mislead the public. I'm merely seeking the truth. Anyone is welcome to read the full conversation between Mr. Goulard and myself on my petition for Victoria, Minnesota page on Facebook under the September 11, 2017 video clip I posted. I must say that I ended up leaving around 9 p.m. at the last meeting while council took a break. I believe it reconvened shortly thereafter and went on until nearly 11 p.m. I watched the video, and again, nearly the entire council meeting was dedicated to the litigation conflict, which from what I could gather resolved nothing. I was at a loss. What could I do? What could I say to get the litigant citizens and Mayor Funk to stop this for the greater good? I certainly understood the litigant citizens' frustration when council ignored their petition for a reverse referendum because history is repeating itself again with me. And now 300 people of Victoria who have signed my petition asking this to stop. It seems to me like we still have the same problem, just a different face. Then I saw the special city council meeting on September 18th. What a perfect example of how the city council meetings should be. Respectful, collaborative, and a true meeting of the minds to put the interests of the people first. I was so inspired and wanted to see more. So I'm here tonight asking that a motion be made that all future council meetings be dedicated only to city business, and anything that involves the litigation controversy be classified as such, and a separate special council meeting be held for those specific reasons. Think about that. We have lost nearly a year, 25% of a 4-year term, and spent thousands of dollars of the taxpayers' money, not counting the $25,000 final defense fees, arguing about something that will probably correct itself by next November at the polls. In the meantime, I will continue my research on how to change the OML statute to clarify its true meaning, so no other city in Minnesota has to endure these kinds of repercussions again. We truly want peace. Thank you.
Council? Okay, next up, Sarah Cohn. Name and address for the record, please.
It's Sarah Kuhn,
I'm sorry.
820 Interlaken. I had previously intended to speak at the August 28th City Council meeting, but because the item I was planning to address was removed from the agenda that night, I chose not to speak. I was shocked at the end of that meeting when the mayor went on a 22-minute tirade about the removed topic, and then, in haste, immediately moved to adjourn the meeting, preventing any further discussion on that topic. That's why I'm here tonight, to speak to the entire council on the general topic of your work. First, I'd like to thank every one of you for your service to this community. Each one of you willingly stepped up to support Victoria as this city grows into the 21st century. This is no small commitment. Your hard work and efforts are appreciated by the many residents like myself who do not feel compelled to public service. So thank you for committing your time to this city. In 2016, the most recent census information I could find, the population of Victoria was 8,917. I find this number a little interesting because if you subtract out the 13 plaintiffs and the 4 defendants who've been involved in this civil lawsuit regarding open meeting law violations, we have exactly 8,900 residents who are not directly involved in this lawsuit. Yet, during the recent months of this current council, you have chosen to spend an excessive amount of council time discussing the lawsuit. In some cases, more than 50% of the total meeting time has been spent discussing the lawsuit. A lawsuit that should be left in the past, a lawsuit that involves very few citizens directly. It's time for you as a council to move forward with this city. As a council, you've had 9 months of service to reconcile your differences and determine how to best serve this city. Each of you needs to consider your role in recent council meetings and ask yourself if you are truly supporting the city of Victoria or do you have other interests in mind. This city's growing. We have streets that are in need of repair. We're adding new residential developments. We have available land for business development. We need to provide for this growth and make improvements to our infrastructure that will support this growth. Are you here to support that growth within our city? Mr. Mayor, your personal website is named Victoria Residents First. That was the campaign slogan you ran under. People voted for you, expecting you would put the city's needs first. Your campaign said, Victoria First. Yet, when I look at your website, I don't see exactly how you're putting Victoria first. It looks more like an angry, bitter website focused on the past. I'm asking that you please put the city of Victoria first. This city has a lot of opportunity for growth. Yet you currently have been choosing to fight amongst yourselves instead of focusing on our future. The 2040 comprehensive plan's due in a year. Yet, where's an update on that? Can we as residents get an update on that? Provide us with the information about our future. Please stop dwelling in the past. All 5 of you have at least 15 more months of service together on this current council. The 8,900 residents of this city who are not involved in the litigation deserve council members who are putting the city's interests ahead of their own personal interests. We expect you to be prepared for the future of our city. You were elected to support this city. Please put the city's interests ahead of your own. And I want to thank you for the discussion you had on civility. I think that's much needed in these council meetings, and I think that is a very good first step forward, and I hope to see more of that. Thank you for your time.
Council comments?
I'm all for removing the discussion of the litigation from this count. I brought it up previously. I'll make a motion. I move that we eliminate all discussion regarding the litigation from this forum going forward.
Council discussion?
There's a motion on the floor.
No, there's not a second yet. So can we have a second on the motion?
That's what I'm asking for. Thank you.
I'll second that.
All right, council discussion?
The litigation is part of city business, and it's something we have to deal with, and it's unfortunate that we do. And no one will be happier when it's over than I am, but it is before us, and we do have to deal with it. I was hoping that sending it into the Attorney General, we would get more of an answer. We didn't. It's going to come before us. It's part of the business. It's something that has to be dealt with. It has infiltrated a lot of what we are doing, but that's just the nature of the whole issue. Whether we like it or not, this is city business. There's potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars if, in fact, the city were to start paying legal fees. And that is not something that we can just, because it's inconvenient or not comfortable to talk about, decide that we just won't discuss it at the council anymore. There's already been $43,000 paid. There was, Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, roughly $50,000 in pending appeal costs that were waived. There's $25,000 that I think the defendant's new attorney is there. And then depending on where this goes, there could be a couple $100,000 more. We just don't know because the legal process is a long, slow process, and the fees add up over that. So I just don't know how we can say that this is not important to the residents of Victoria, since they're the ones that are being asked to try to pay this bill. And we can't just say, well, we're not going to talk about it because it's not convenient or it's not comfortable to talk about. Council, other comments, please?
Mr. Mayor, I'm aware of 25,000 potential legal costs out there. If there's going to be hundreds of thousands or another 100,000 in legal costs or another 200,000, better explain where this is going because the appeal, the judges will rule on the appeal before the end of this year. So what are you saying? I mean, this is crazy. We have citizens coming up here every 2 weeks asking us to stop this.
Right, I can't
to stop the nonsense. And now you're talking about there might be 100,000 or 200,000 more legal costs because you don't know what's going to happen. What are you talking about? Can we stop the nonsense? Are we going to stop the nonsense when the judge would judges make a ruling in 90 days? That's when I would expect the nonsense to stop.
Okay, I can't predict the future. I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the appellate court is going to do, and we're not going to discuss that since it's before the court now. But let me finish, please. What we don't know is, regardless of what ruling comes out of the appellate court, who's to say that the defendants won't appeal? Who's to say the plaintiffs won't appeal? We just don't know those questions. We don't know those answers. And depending on what happens, potentially there could be significantly more legal fees. But I can't predict the future any more than anybody else. So what I don't want to do, this is why I think it's an important part of the city council and the city's business, is to understand those potential costs down the road, which is why I think this topic needs to be discussed. Councilmember Crowley, go ahead.
I made my comment.
Mayor, if I may. So I understood that you made a motion on the open forum item to return, in the view of some, to the policy of responding to comments made during the open forum. I understood that that passed. I didn't understand the policy to have changed from what's written in your agenda statement, which is the city council will take no action on items discussed in the open forum. Items discussed at the open forum may be referred to the staff for possible consideration at a future meeting, which I think means placed on a future agenda. So you are totally, as a council, you have the discretion to get rid of that policy, but that's been the policy, and I think that's, by acting on this tonight, you would be not following that policy.
So thank you. Councilmember Crowley, I think you made this motion if you don't have any objection, and based on Mr. Vosa's comment, I would suggest that we move this to the next meeting as an agenda item so that we can follow our own policy that's in place on the agenda. Would you stipulate to that?
I'll withdraw the motion, providing it's on the next agenda.
Okay. Lori, can you please have that item added?
Again.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to speak at the open forum? All right. Seeing none, let's move to the next item, consent agenda. Lori, any changes?
No changes, Mayor.
Council, any changes?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item B, claims roster.
Item B, claims roster pulled. The public has the ability to pull anything. Would anybody from the public want to pull anything? Seeing nothing, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with claims roster being pulled from it? I'll make that motion. I move that we approve the consent agenda minus item B, claims roster, which will be discussed immediately after the approval of the rest of the items. Is there a second?
Second motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none.
Abstain.
The consent.
Yeah, there's an item on there that I'd like to discuss. I don't believe I have a legal conflict, but I have a personal conflict, and I'd like to discuss that.
Wait a minute, on the claims roster or on the?
On the claims roster.
Right. So you shouldn't abstain then approving the rest of the roster then. So the motion on the table was to approve the consent agenda minus item B. That motion was seconded. Let's do that vote again. All in favor of approving the consent agenda minus item B, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved 5-0 minus item B. We'll now take up item B. Councilmember Gregory?
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, this isn't why I pulled it, but I just wanted to ask the question. City of Chanhassen, Neil Diamond Show Trip. What is that?
We do have some partnerships with the Chanhassen Senior Center, and so they will invoice us for our attendees, I believe. Is that what that one's referring to?
Okay. All right, thank you. Under U.S. Bank, where am I at? Did I lose it?
I think what you're looking for is on the bottom of page 3 of 5, if I can guess accurately.
Bottom of page 3.
Ben, can we bring that up real quick, please?
Really?
Are you looking for the flowers?
Yes.
Yeah. It's about.
Anyways, whatever. Do you have the number?
I do. It is
$83.
correct.
And
48 cents.
yes, that is an item for my father's funeral. Flowers for my father's funeral. I thanked the city manager at the time, but now that I see it in print, I think I'd like that. I'd like to reimburse the city for that. I think there's people in the city that would use that and put it in print or social media to attack me or my family. That's how ugly this whole issue has gotten. So I do have a check here for $100. I would like to donate to the city of Victoria to cover that expense.
I would just state that it is the city of Victoria's practice to send a gesture of condolence when loved ones of the city council or staff pass away or there's a funeral.
So I have no objections. I think the proper process would be for the staff to process that as a donation for, that we can approve in the next council meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct. All donations over $50 are accepted formally by the city council.
Okay. Councilmember Gregory, were there any other issues on the claims roster?
No, sir.
Okay. At this point, unless council has further discussion, I move that we approve a claims roster with the exception noted by Councilmember Gregory. Is there a second?
I'm confused. The exception, basically, we would pay the claims roster and accept the check from Councilman Gregory.
I stand corrected. You are correct. So I move that we approve the claims roster as is. Is there item B? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
Abstain.
Approved 4-0 with one abstention.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, just before we move on from the consent agenda, item C, the prosecution contract, I don't want to discuss any of the details of it, but typically we would get a presentation from Mark Metz or somebody from the county attorney's office to present the fees and the whole kind of plan for the year. Is there a reason why that's not happening and we're just including this as part of the consent agenda this year?
Happy to have the county attorney come out. We typically have not done it every year, simply because the arrangement and the details change very little from year to year, but I'd be happy to ask Mark or a member of his staff to attend a future meeting if you'd like.
I think yes. I mean, this year we've got more police coverage. We've got, I think it's always a relatively significant budget line item. So I guess I would be in favor of hearing from the county attorney on that.
Sure. Would you like me to hold off on sending that executed contract? Can somebody just pull up the presentation quick?
I guess it's my opinion that we don't need to delay the contract, but I would like to get the presentation opportunity to discuss it with the
Council, I'd like to, sorry,
I'm done.
Council, is there consensus on that?
Yeah, it's always good to hear from him.
It's fine.
That's fine. Lori, can you see if you can have them come in and give a visitor presentation then? And I also heard, go ahead and not delay the contract. Go ahead and send it forward.
Correct.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, donations. Would somebody, Ben, if we can get this up on the screen? All right. Can I have a motion to accept the donations as noted?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution accepting donations from the following individuals and organizations. Mary Kay Springer in memory of Randy Miller in the amount of $50 dedicated to the fire department. Donald and Alita Dyer in the amount of $100 dedicated to the fire department. Minnetonka School District 276 in the amount of $100 dedicated to the fire department. The Victoria Firefighters Relief Association donating a thermal imaging camera valued at $7,800 to the fire department, and also a tree valued at $700 designated to the Madison Park in Landmark neighborhood in memory of Madison Mertz, donated by the Balloos, the Bandrites, the Dudziaks, the Elmans, the Fingers, the Flahertys, Fornettis, Goins, Hake, Amdahl, Reinhard, Rossalenk, and Spenley families, with gratitude and apologies if I mispronounced anybody's name.
It's seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Next item, new business. Ben, this is your final plat, Hill Point, please.
Yes, thank you. Before the council tonight is the final plat for a project referred to as Hill Point. This is the final step in the process. I hope the council's not extremely tired of seeing this slide or talking about process, but certainly I think it's always good to point out kind of where we've been. This project was originally presented to the council in March of this year, came back for preliminary plat and rezoning approval in June, and then tonight obviously looking at final plat. Have been a number of opportunities for neighborhood interaction, have not had any formal comments come forward as part of this project, even with final plat. Did talk with one of the adjacent neighbors, but was more a question about what the process looks like when the project goes into actual development, not just the approval process for platting purposes. So the parcel being considered tonight on the screen before you, outlined in red, 2 separate properties, technically 3, now with the council's approval of a minor lot split at the previous council meeting. The largest of the 2 referred to as a Vanderlinde piece, so commonly this throughout the process has had a lot of Vanderlinde references. And tonight, looking at, again, that final step of creating a total of 24 lots on the 2 properties, 2 of those properties being reserved for existing homes, neither of which are currently connected to public utilities, but through the process of development will end up being connected to both water and sewer as a part of the process. The majority of the lots being served from a new public street, so the name of the development being Hill Point Lane being the name of the new street, somewhere close to the halfway point between the Alley Lane and 86th Street intersection off Bavaria Road. There are 2 private drives, the first of which, as you enter the site from Bavaria Road, serving 2 of the lots, one of which housing that Vanderlinde household. The second private drive at the far north side of the project, providing access to 3 lots. I know we spent quite a bit of time at the preliminary plat process going through kind of the routing of utilities. Everything today exists on Alley Lane, and that's being pulled into or connected into the project from that point. The kind of light green property here, a large wetland, as well as some stormwater management facilities being installed as part of development. That outlot A, will be dedicated to the city, which is common practice. Outlot B, which is kind of this darker gray or dark green color in the southeast corner of the project, that is being reserved by the developer and could be attached to property that's technically in the city of Chaska as additional development potential in the future. Just for reference, and I'm certainly happy to come back and talk through details, what we've been doing since we adopted the new residential zoning district classifications is just giving you a kind of a snapshot of how this relates to those adopted provisions. This is the first project that will be platted under the new R1 zoning district regulations. You can kind of see from the comparison up top and kind of the blue colored format, how it relates to the adopted minimum conditions that are in our zoning district down below. Again, happy to talk through any details of the project. Final plat as traditional, just identifying the 24 lots, right-of-ways, and outlots. We did receive a final landscape plan, which is common practice to check that. The city does have a tree preservation replacement policy. We'll note, similar to what was presented at the preliminary plat, this is consistent with the requirements not only for preservation replacement, but also some of the new buffering requirements that have recently been adopted by the city, particularly along Bavaria Road. And then, again, for reference, this being more of a custom build neighborhood, so generally looking at larger sized homes, could be one builder, but could also be a different builder or a group of different homes across the entire development. Included in your packet of information is a resolution for your consideration. Within that, there are 8 conditions outlined. Those are identified on the screen as well. All of these fairly standard. First one talking about providing title work, which the developer has. Our city attorney has provided a title opinion based upon that title work. Development agreement, as typical, needs to abide by those conditions or specific things, making sure the correct entities are signing off on that development agreement, and then looking at the various zoning provisions and some of the other conditions themselves that have been brought up specific to this development are outlined in the remaining 7 conditions here. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to go through. We do have Terry Hartman representing the developer here if you have any questions of him. Otherwise, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for me.
Thank you, Ben. Council, questions?
Ben, is it my understanding, no changes since the preliminary plat, and we're in full compliance with R1, excuse me, R1 zoning?
That is correct.
Thank you.
I noted on one of the drawings, there was a reference, it looked like it was a township plat, and I'm wondering, is this land currently part of Victoria proper, or, right in here, it says section 18 of the township?
Yep.
Or is this being annexed as part of the development?
It's currently in the city limits of Victoria, and typical to how things are given legal descriptions, they do reference kind of an old metrics of township ranges. That's simply just giving an idea of what the original parcel was, and nothing specific to do with the property today physically living in the township.
Thank you.
My question for Ann, I did get a call from a resident who was concerned about the trail going through here. And could you just kind of give us an update of what you hope to see in the future for this trail all the way to Highway 5?
Sure. Good evening, Mayor, Council. The trail along Bavaria from 86th Street to Highway 5 has been identified for several years as a high priority from the Park and Rec Committee, the council, and also our participation in the trail group that encompasses Eastern Carver County. This item was brought to the council earlier this year for possibility of a grant submittal, and at the time the council decided to not do that. So we've been working slowly but surely along with the process of development. In this development, there will be a trail installed on the west side of, or the east side of Bavaria with the development here. And as the development continues to go up, we will include trail along that as we continue to work through the whole process of getting trail all the way along Bavaria, which could take some time.
A lot of time.
Yep. So.
Thank you, Ann. Council, other questions, comments?
It looks good.
If there's no other comments, can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution related to the approval of a final plat for Hill Point.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. The next item, 6B, Kelly?
Okay, so for tonight, the council will be considering a preliminary levy and general fund budget for adoption and taxes in 2018. Just to give you a review of where we're at in the process, we're at the stage of adopting that preliminary budget and levy. We do have to submit a preliminary levy to the county by September 30th of each year. And once that's adopted, our final levy can be no higher than what was adopted in the preliminary levy. Tonight's step is by no means the last step in the process. Throughout October and November, staff will continue to refine the budget. The Finance Committee will look at it at least one more time. We'll continue to look for reductions in that. And then at the end of November, we will have another council workshop to go over where we're at with the general fund budget, along with our utility fund budgets, the rec center, and then we'll also review the city's capital improvement plan. And then finally, we would have that final budget and levy adoption hearing in December. So just to give a general overview, we're projecting revenues of close to $4.8 million, almost a $500,000 increase over the 2017 budget, which represents an 11.6% increase. For total expenditures, we're projecting just under a $300,000 increase, which is about a 7.6% increase. And then a rather significant boost in transfers, going from $375,000 to $572,000. About almost $200,000. The budget leaves a a small surplus of $34,151, and that is the amount needed to keep the city's unassigned fund balance at 30% at year end, per the city's policy. The overall numbers I'm presenting tonight are very similar to what was presented in August. There are 4 items that make up about $283,000 of the increase in expenditures. And those items are the increase in the sheriff's contract, the new HR communications manager position, the building inspection position, which has already been hired, but we're incorporating it into the budget, and then the Southwest Prime Rideshare Program. At this point, we do have quite a few of the numbers solidified, but one of the biggest unknowns at this point is the city's health insurance renewal rate. We won't get that until October.
Let me interrupt real quick. Can we get the slides forwarded?
I'm still on this slide.
Oh, I thought we had another. All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. So staff will continue to look for any reductions that we could get. So in terms of what's new in 2018, some of this will be a little bit of review from last time, but we did talk about the human resources communications manager position. We did push the start date back on that a bit to April 1, just because we saw some increases in a few other line items, and we did not want to present any higher amount in the budget. So we pushed the start date back on that position a little bit. Another new item would be the city's citizen survey. This would be a follow-up to a survey that was done in 2015, which is very helpful as part of the strategic planning process. There's also a budget increase for park playground replacement. We found that the amount we've been budgeting for playground replacement just doesn't work to get the job done. So there's a sizable increase to get Woodlands Park replaced in 2018. Last time at the workshop, we talked about the Southwest Prime Rideshare Program. That would be that shared ride public transit service that would operate in the city Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., with a projection of 15 riders a day, and then a city subsidy on a portion of that ride. With that, the riders could go to Chaska, Chanhassen, or Eden Prairie if that is their final destination, or they could ultimately catch a bus to head downtown if they'd like. We also proposed a transfer to a new Parks and Trails Fund, and this would be something that would help us to get to those items that we're continually having to decline because there is no funding available. So there's $100,000 for that line item. And then also we had discussed at the workshop about a transfer to the long-term street maintenance fund as part of a proposal to move the seal coating expenses out of the general fund and average those out over 5 years, and then factor in the revenue that would come in from municipal state aid for streets. And then the difference between those two average would be the amount that we need to transfer to the long-term street maintenance fund for the next 5 years. We did have a few department areas that did see reductions overall from 2017 to 2018. The fire department is going down by approximately $26,000, partly because of the pension contribution reduction, and then also there's no planned capital outlay in 2018. Civil defense is going down because there's no planned capital outlay in 2018. And then public works is decreasing by nearly $84,000 due to a couple of things, mostly due, though, to the moving of the seal coating expenditures to the long-term street maintenance fund. So in terms of budget increases, elections is going up because it's every other year we have an election, so that's the reason for that. Professional services is going up by about $29,000. What's entailed with that is our legal, engineering, auditing, IT, and assessor, basically those professional services that we contract out.
Kelly, can I jump in for a second? What does that reflect in terms of like percentage growth, or whatever, the professional services?
The overall change in professional services.
Correct, yeah,
line item.
29,000 against a line item of how much?
The budgeted line item for 2018 is just over 301,000. So that would be a 10.7% increase.
What's driving that? There's something specific?
A large part of it is our IT contract. We've moved recently from a call when it's broken and only when it's broken solution to a fully managed solution where our provider is able to manage things proactively. We actually had the fully managed solution in place prior to 2008, and then when we were making significant budget cuts, that was one of the areas where we cut. And we're at the point where we felt it prudent to restore that fully managed solution.
Do you see a point in time where that becomes a headcount in-house?
I do, but I don't think it's any time in the near term. And when Kelly and I looked at the cost for the fully managed, that is something that we thought about. We're not paying in total for that contract, something that would approach a full-time position. And IT, as you know, it's a very competitive environment, so it's not something that's going to come cheaply. So I don't see that in the next 5 years, but I do eventually see that would be an integral staff position.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly, real quick, you said in professional services there are 5 items, if I understood right: legal, engineering, IT, auditing, and a 5th one?
Assessor.
Assessor, okay.
County assessor.
Got it, thank you.
Okay, so for the police contract, that total line item is going up by 85,000, and that's due to that being the first full year of having the additional sheriff's deputy, bringing us to 24/7 coverage. And that cost does include a second patrol car as needed as part of that change.
Do we expect that, is that patrol car a portion of that will pay each year, or is that a one-time cost?
That
how
is
much
each
in there?
year.
Okay.
I think the patrol car portion was 21,000 of the 85,000.
And we'll pay that every year?
We'll have that every year, yes.
Thank you.
Building inspections is going up by about 147,000. This is due to the additional building inspector. This position has been hired. The council approved that earlier this summer. However, we have not fully budgeted for that position yet. So 2018 is the first year that is incorporated into the budget. And then we've also seen that we need to budget for family health insurance for all 3 full-time positions in this particular department, so that's also a cost driver for this increase. Street lighting is going up by about 19,500. That's primarily due to the addition of 2 street lights for the Rose Street parking lot.
Is that an operating cost, or is that an equipment acquisition cost?
It's an acquisition cost, so that's a one-time. And then under park maintenance, the big driver for that increase would be that Woodlands Park playground addition. So in terms of overall general government expenditures, they are just over 1.5 million, representing about 36% of the budget. Some of the departments in that category would be administration, mayor and council, finance, elections, all of the professional services, planning and zoning, and then the city hall building expenses. The next biggest item would be public safety, and that's just under 1.3 million. And the 3 main departments in that category would be police, fire, and building inspections. Next would be public works, coming in at 882,000. That represents 21% of the budget, and that would be for the streets, snow plowing, signal and street lights, and then the city's composting program. And then finally, Park and Rec, just over 500,000, 12% of the budget. This would be for the city's recreation programs, parks and parks maintenance. And then I would note that the recreation center is a completely separate fund, so there are no expenditures for the recreation center in this particular, in the general fund budget. Another way the city looks at its expenditures is to classify them by object code. So when you do that, you'll see that the wages and benefits portion of the general fund is just over, well, it's over 2 million, representing 49% of the general fund budget. I thought it was important to note that the percent allocated to wages and benefits is much lower for the other funds that we do budget for. So we budget for the rec center, the water and sewer and stormwater funds. So if you looked at the percent of wages and benefits in comparison to total expenditures for the city's 5 budgeted funds, wages and benefits make up 37% of the total. And then if you include all of the city's funds, wages and benefits make up 21% of the total city spending. So just to kind of put that number in perspective. The next largest line item for this would be contracted services, and these are all the services that we contract out because we don't have the staff to work on those, and that's $1,263,000, or 30% of the general fund budget. Supplies, repairs, and maintenance costs about $460,000. Utilities is about $179,000, or 4% of the budget. The other category, and this would be things like the fire relief pension, the city hall lease, various rentals, continuing education, tuition reimbursement programs, things that are of that nature. And finally, planned capital outlay for the year is $59,000, or 2% of the budget. And that's just in the general fund. In looking at total revenues, 80% of the city's budget comes from taxes and franchise fees, and that comes in at just over $3.8 million. The next largest line item would be charges for services at $453,000. There are 3 main items in this category: building permit plan check fees, cellular antenna rental fees, and then the city's recreation fees. The next category would be licenses and permits, coming in at about $447,000. And this would be for building permits, alcoholic beverages licenses, and then utility right-of-way permits. The city does not get very much in intergovernmental revenue. There are 2 items that make up this $37,000. That part of it is a reimbursement from the county for composting, and then we also receive a portion of state police aid. You may remember that we used to have municipal state aid for streets coming into the general fund. That is now going to be going into the long-term street maintenance fund. And then the other category of $34,000, that is items like interest on investments and the city's fine revenue.
How much is franchise fees?
The franchise fees in the general fund budget are for cable, and those are approximately $65,000 per year. And then this last year, the council had enacted the franchise fee for gas and electric, and those go into a special fund to help pay the undergrounding. And
Okay, so the gas and electric, which is really the underground wiring, isn't in here.
That's not in there, that's correct.
How much is that?
I think we were projecting $200,000 plus per year from franchise fees. I'm finding that the initial numbers we got from the gas and electric were a little bit off, but we're still going to be fine in terms of making our debt service payments. In terms of budgeted transfers, the water fund loan, we have the $150,000 proposed in 2018, and then we would just have one more payment of $150,000 in 2019, and that loan will be fully repaid. As discussed, we have the new Parks and Trails Fund transfer, the long-term street maintenance fund transfer. The average came out to $42,000 needed over the 5 years for seal coating. So total transfers would be going up $197,000. Just to talk a little bit about that unfunded Parks and Trails transfer, there was discussion to, especially at the Finance Committee, that it'd be nice to get some kind of funding source for these various unfunded park control capital items we have. We've identified over $30 million in projects if you count in the pool and then the possible enclosure of the pool. So that represents about half of the $30 million that's shown here. The idea would be to increase that transfer by $50,000 annually, and you can see that in 5 years we'd have $1 million accumulated, and then after 10 years there would be $3,250,000 accumulated in that fund if we were to continue on with a $50,000 increase annually. And it also it affected the city's tax rate, but does not make the city's tax rate increase from the rate it's currently at to continue this transfer program.
Kelly, what's the approximate cost? Mile, quarter mile, 100 yards of a trail?
I'd have to defer to Ann on that one.
The cost per mile?
Or whatever, pick your distance. I mean, what if we have $100,000, how long of a trail can we put in?
Mayor, Council, that's kind of a complicated question. If we were dealing with
Flat.
Yeah. No ditches.
Yep.
So, for example, based on some really preliminary numbers, if the Bavaria Trail, for example, from 86th Street up to Highway 5, and I want to say that's less than a mile, but we were projecting that in the $600,000 to $800,000 because we are dealing with ditches and rural section roads. So, but a flat, nice piece of, if that was all urban development, we had no issues going up, you're probably looking at a $200,000 cost versus that. So there's a lot of variables involved.
Thank you. And where I was going with this is if we look at the transfer to pay off the 13.5 acres of $150,000 by 2019, that might become, or that could become, a source to go towards trails. I mean, continuing to pay that, but now allocate it towards another need. Obviously, we can cut it back and we can cut spending. I'm always in favor of that. But we do have to find a way, I agree, to fund some of these, the trails in particular.
We used to talk about $10 million in unfunded projects, and, you know, at that rate, $3.2 million over 10 years seems like a reasonable dent in it, but wow.
Well, and one of the things, too, that we can consider is that there is always the potential for some grant funding. And usually they're a match, whether it's a 50% match, 25% match. At least then this gives you some starter money to help with the cost of that grant application and
Maybe
paying
take
for
it more
that.
broadly.
Well, if you keep the pool separate, how much is the pool in here?
Well, the initial pool was 6.2, and then the enclosure was 7. So
And that's
So-
all
so-
in this number, right?
yeah.
The-
Yeah,
Correct.
so basically it's half of this if you exclude the pool, which is,
Well, and I think
Yeah.
that conversation has always been kind of prefaced by private money to build it.
correct.
And I guess I think maybe to your point, Councilmember Vogt, that should be a separate,
Pull it out.
I don't think it should be in this number in terms of talking about what's unfunded.
with all due respect, I think it probably not for the dollars that we've got it. And I'll tell you why. I think the pool that we've got, the thing with the pool we've got to watch out for is ongoing maintenance and the cost to run the pool going forward. So there's two pieces here. We've got the cost, the initial investment, but we don't really have anything for operating funds. So
But this is a capital fund, I believe.
yeah, I think so. But I think the pool just tells you in the universe of things that could be considered. You know, we're looking at 30 million. And if you exclude the pool, we're looking at half of that, but that's still a lot of money.
Right, and I'm not saying get rid of the pool, I'm saying separately identified.
Separate but equal. Well,
and so,
Comes out.
back to my previous comment, taken more broadly, as we pay down debt, consideration, I think, should be given towards taking that cash flow and allocating it towards some of these projects. Not all of it, but I think there's an opportunity to do some.
Well, and I think that the Park and Rec Committee too, they look at the priorities on an annual basis and hear from the residents on where those priorities are. And so I anticipate that they'll come up with a pretty good list of items for consideration once we move forward.
I think the important thing here is probably the most immediate is we've tripped on this over and over again. The trails aren't connected, and there are some things that are safety issues, and it's very expensive to do these connections, and we're not keeping pace. So this is one way of trying to catch up.
And I do applaud that because we've had that issue in the past where we have a grant opportunity, we budgeted, we have no funds available that aren't allocated, and we couldn't take advantage of a grant, or we had to do a quick shuffle to figure out a way to do that. So I think this is a much more proactive way to address those needs. So I think that's a good step forward.
Thank you. Kelly?
Okay, so this list just shows the different projects that we've identified. These are not projects that have been committed to by the city council, but rather items that we've identified just to get to that $30 million line item. So I won't cover all of those in detail unless there's a specific question about any of those. Okay, so we have a proposed budget, and so what that means is that a levy of $3,715,000 would be needed for the general fund, and a debt service levy of just over $1.1 million would be needed according to our various debt obligations. So we're looking at a levy of $4,847,500. Which is $480,500 higher than the previous year's levy. And the amount that I'm showing here is unchanged from what was presented at the August workshop. In looking at the city's levy history, you can see that in 2017 the levy was slightly higher than the city's prior high point, which was in 2009. And then with 2018, we would have our first significant increase since then. In terms of tax impact, this is where the biggest changes have occurred since I last spoke to you in August. The numbers that I used in August, I was basing the net tax capacity on the city assessor or the county assessor's estimated market value numbers. However, the Carver County sent over their final tax capacity numbers, and tax capacity was quite a bit higher than what I projected. I had initially projected that we would have net tax capacity of 13.8 million, and it came in at about 14.1 million. And then also, the city receives a fiscal disparities contribution amount each year, and the amount I had for that was about $20,000 less than what it ultimately came in. So that results in it's a net reduction in the levy that is assessed to taxpayers. So With that, the budget as proposed would come in with a tax rate that is actually slightly below what we had in 2017, despite the increase in the levy. The median valued home amount did not change. That's going up by about $25,000. But the projected tax on the median valued home is lower than what we had forecast at the August workshop. The annual increase to the median valued home owner would be about $86, or roughly $7 a month, compared to when I spoke to you last month. We were projecting taxes on that median valued home would be $1,322 a year. So just by getting that extra tax capacity, it brought the tax rate down and the taxes down. This chart shows the city's tax rate history. You can see that since 2015, the city has been able to keep that tax rate flat, and in fact, decrease it even slightly compared to what we were in the 2012, 2013 years. When comparing the median valued home and city taxes, with that projected tax of $1,294, that is still lower than what taxes on the median valued home would have been in 2009 when they were $1,381. And in 2010, that median valued home would have been paying $1,340. And then in terms of the median valued home, that has recovered the value significantly. In 2009, the median valued home was $368,000, and now in 2018, we're projecting nearly $397,000 for the median valued home. Mm-hmm. Question?
Just have a comment. We have this discussion almost every year. Go back to that tax impact slide that you had. That one. Okay. It says the tax rate is 32%. Well, I kind of hate that we have to do this because our tax rate is not 32%. This is a calculation basis. If you look at the tax on a median value home, it's $1,200. What's $1,200 as a percentage of $396? It's about 0.3%. So our actual tax rate is 0.3%, or 0.4, whatever it is. And this is a calculation basis. So the problem with these slides is somebody sees that and says the tax rate in Victoria is 32%. It isn't. It's less than 1%. So, I mean, we should clarify that as to what the 32% is. Our tax rate is indeed going down. It is indeed a very decent tax rate in Carver County, et cetera, et cetera. But our tax rate for the city of Victoria is very small. So can you elaborate on that so that...
I can. And I don't know if this is what you're getting at, is a comparison with how we've done historically.
I mean, how is the 32% calculated? How do you get to 32%?
It's a formula based on the city's overall net tax capacity and what the city's levy is. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if it's as simple as dividing those two numbers off the top of my head, but
it's a tax capacity rate.
It's 32% of our tax capacity, so our roughly $3.7 or $3.8 million tax levy is 32.7% of that 14 million capacity.
Whatever the calculation is, to Councilmember Vote's point, I think it's important to explain that so they understand where the 32%.
Yeah, the 32.75% is it's multiplied by the tax capacity of that median valued home, I believe, to get to the actual tax number. So if you looked at that home valued at $400,000, if you took roughly 1% of that to get the tax capacity number, and there are some there's a market value homestead exclusion that comes into play, and there's a couple of other things that come into play if it's a high valued property. But basically, 1% of the market value will give you your tax capacity number. And
Right.
you take that tax capacity number, which is, a fraction of what the median valued home actually is. You multiply that by the tax rate to get the actual tax number.
So if we have a total market value, assessed value of our homes, our tax capacity rate is 32.75%, and we apply that, our tax rate to it. Basically, the 1,294 is about 0.3%. So our tax rate, we're talking about a tax rate that's going from 0.3% to 0.3%. And so it's pretty good. This business of using the tax capacity rate in our conversations is kind of, to me, it's dangerous, because anybody that's listening says, my God, what's going on in Victoria? 0.3% is our tax rate.
Yeah.
Sorry for
It's-
going
it's-
off on that, but
You always compare those to other cities, and it's actually reasonable.
yeah, it's very reasonable, and it's not the highest in the world either. That's the other thing I keep hearing.
Well, I think if you jump forward, you'll see it's third lowest in Carver County, right?
Right. So we're doing a pretty good job, I think.
Yeah, I haven't shown this type of information before, but I thought it would, now might be a good time to start maybe being a little proud in what the city's been able to do since 2009 in terms of tax rate. Victoria is the only city of those cities listed in this chart that actually has a current tax rate that's lower than what they had in 2009.
Chanhasen's, trend-wise looks flat.
There you go.
And
Victoria,
we are trend-wise down.
looking good.
Everyone else trend-wise looks up. Some significantly.
Excuse me, sorry for the interruption. I really am sorry. How do we stand with the rest of the state? Do you know? We're looking pretty decent. We're in the middle of the pack in Carver County, but a lot of people say Carver County is one of the highest taxed counties in the state. How do we weigh in statewide?
I recently did some analysis of that, and I don't have it in front of me, but I just looked at the 9-county metro area, and we were Carver County was right in the middle of those. There were a couple that were slightly lower, a couple that were higher, but not, Carver County does not have the highest tax
So
rate.
that's another rumor that we should squelch.
State is usually what they say, not nation, but yes.
Yeah, and I looked at the League of Minnesota Cities does a lot of calculations for property taxes and values and rates, and they recently put out a report. And when I looked at the report and compared us to cities that were up to 5,000 in population in the metro, and then cities in the metro, cities in the metro between 5 and 10,000 in population, and also cities in the metro that were 10,000 to 15,000, just to see how we compared. And we were about average for cities of those size in the metro. So I think we're right in the middle of the pack when you start evaluating metro cities. I think it's kind of unfair to evaluate us against cities that are not in the metro area, just because a lot of those cities are receiving local government aid. They're going to have much lower property tax values. So it's kind of hard to do a good comparison with those cities, but I think it's fair to compare us to other metro cities of similar population size. Okay, so the next chart shows the city's tax levy history, and the thing that I would pick up from this is that most of the cities on this list have a steady increase in their levies since 2009. But Victoria has what I would call a smile pattern, where we were high, we reduced it when we had the recession, and now we're gradually increasing that again. So, And this was my favorite chart of all, because what it shows is that between 2010 and 2017, Victoria had the highest growth in population of those cities, but also the lowest growth in levy during that same time frame.
Nice chart.
In terms of property taxes, it's important to note that when you actually do pay your property tax bill, not all of that is going to the city. For each $100 paid in property taxes, about $44 is going to the school district. Another $28 of that is going to Carver County. The amount that actually is going to the city of Victoria is about $24. And then there's some other taxing districts that account for about $4, and that would be like the Met Council, mosquito control, and the watershed districts. So in terms of this levy and what does it mean for the future and the different projections we have, the city does a long-term financial plan. And in looking out to 2027, the city is boosting its new home permit forecast from 90 to 111 homes. But our other line items are still at the same level and are, I would say, pretty conservative. Other revenues going up about 2.5% per year. We're projecting an increase in expenditures of 3% annually, plus adding a public works staff member every other year. Projecting that market value and the median valued home would continue to increase about 2.5% annually. And then also planning to issue bonds for different street reconstruction projects and continue the transfers that we've talked about in the budget, including that Parks and Trails Fund and the Street Maintenance Fund.
Kelly, can you go back, please? Mm-hmm. For the 111 new home permits, what's the total amount of that?
What's the total we're at now?
For 111, what's the total dollar amount of 111 home permits? Approximately.
I would say it's probably about 500,000 when you factor in the plan check fees.
So always looking at different scenarios. If the economy turns and we drop to 70, so that means we would have to cut $150,000, $200,000.
That would be something we could look at. We also do have the Revenue Stabilization Fund that is a fallback too if we think it's going to be a kind of an anomaly or a short-term blip. We do have about $330,000 in that fund right now and expect we're going to have a pretty sizable contribution this year, probably in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. Okay. So we do have some cushion for a downturn. However, if it's another recession, we definitely would have to look at reducing that 111 new home permits.
Permits are up considerably over 111, correct?
Yes.
We're just over 130 at the end of August.
Okay.
But the projection for this year will be probably 160.
That's
100.
probably safe.
170.
Yeah.
So this is very conservative, 111.
Yeah, we've met the target of 111 new home permits, I think in 4 of the last 5 years. So,
Kelly, we had talked at one point about kind of target or maximum for some of these fund balances. And what is that for the Revenue Stabilization Fund?
the maximum for that fund is equal to 4 times our budgeted building permit revenue for the year. So for 2018, it's approximately 600,000 we're budgeting, so roughly 2.4 million would be the new maximum.
All right, thank you.
So in looking at the projections through 2027 based on these different assumptions, we're projecting an annual tax rate of 31 to 33% each year, being able to maintain that 30% general fund unassigned fund balance each year. And then we're projecting some pretty sizable increases in both households and population, going up 36% and 35%. And then again, we'll be able to have that interfund loan to the water fund paid off by 2019. So the next steps in the process, in October and November, we'll continue to work on this budget along with the other city budgets that we adopt, and then review the city's capital improvement plan, which is a 5-year plan of the different capital improvements for the various departments. We would plan to have a council budget workshop in November, and then on December 11th is when we would set that final budget and levy adoption hearing. This meeting, or this adoption hearing, would be held during the regular city council meeting, which is scheduled to start at 6:30 p.m. And then it's important to note that the final levy cannot be higher than the preliminary levy that's set tonight. And during that meeting, the public would be allowed input on that. Although I would say that as staff, we welcome public input at any point or any questions regarding the budget. So, with that, any questions?
Thank you, Kelly. Council, questions? If no questions, can we get the resolution up on the screen, please? Council, can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve. Is the levy the $4,740,000? Is that the
Yes.
dollar amount?
Let's do the levy first. Let's do this one here. So the total certified levy is $4,659,500. That includes the general fund and the different debt service components. And then the $188,000 levy for the EDA was adopted earlier. So that totals you to the numbers I had in the slides for an overall levy.
I'll make a motion to approve the overall levy of $4,659,500.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, passes unanimously.
And then
Okay, is there a second resolution here?
yes, the second resolution is to approve the preliminary 2018 general fund budget. So that one is showing total revenues of $4,774,294, total expenditures of $4,168,143, transfers of $572,000, with then leaving a contribution to fund balance of $34,151.
Council, can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary general fund budget as portrayed here. Should I read the numbers, or is that a good enough motion?
I don't think you need to read
I
it.
don't think, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes unanimously. Next item, unfinished business. Tom Gregory, or Councilmember Gregory, would you
Certainly.
proceed?
Well, I think we have two issues that we're looking at here. First, we need to discuss and vote on whether or not we should release these legal memos that were produced, I believe, in June of 2016. And then second of all, I think there's another issue here, whether or not anybody on the council has a conflict of interest regarding these. For the first part, releasing the memos, the staff has indicated that if we release them, we would be at risk of legal action. I kind of beg to differ. Both the city attorney, city manager weren't here when we were putting these deals together for the City Hall Public Works building. At that time, when we were putting those deals together, I think there was a strong perception in the community that far too much was being decided outside of City Hall. And I think it was that perception of lack of transparency that kind of gave rise to the lawsuit itself. So if we vote no on this, I think we're giving we're sending a message that there's something in these memos that we don't want released. And I've read them. I don't think that's the case. Releasing the memos, I think it's a sign of lack of transparency, or sign of transparency, and a sign of transparency, as far as I'm concerned, is a good thing. So as far as that goes, I'd be in favor of it. As far as if anybody has a conflict of interest, whether Councilman Crowley or Councilman Striegel weigh in on this, that, quite frankly, is not my concern. Those decisions, conflict of interest, are personal decisions. Individual members up here choose for themselves whether they have a conflict of interest. And when the mayor made his choice in July to remove his conflict, I didn't make a big deal out of it. I said it was his choice. He had an attorney that said he did not have a conflict of interest. That was his choice. I use words like unusual and extraordinary, but quite frankly, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a judge. If he has a legal conflict, those are the people that get to decide that. We had to go through this big process where we had to produce a 7-page legal memo and at taxpayers' expense to decide if the mayor had a conflict, and we had a vote. I didn't participate. I abstained, again, because I'm not an attorney. Whether Councilman Striegel or Crowley weigh in on this, again, that's their decision. My concern is that staff has decided, both our attorney and city manager have decided, that all 5 of us can weigh in on this. If Councilmember Striegel and Crowley do have a stated legal conflict, I personally don't see the wall between what we're doing here, what we're discussing, and their stated legal conflict. These memos were produced in 2016 and given to the city manager, and based on those memos, she made the decision that she has unilateral authority to pay these bills, to an extent that she gets to decide how much she's going to pay. And we don't know what that number is yet, whether that's a correct assumption or not, but that's pretty much the way I see this. So my concern is not whether or not everybody weighs in. My concern is the legal advice that's giving them the authority to weigh in. I don't see the difference. I see these two issues joined at the hip, and whether they have a stated legal conflict, I don't see the difference myself, but hopefully we can get some more information on that.
Council.
So I'd like to ask Council, City Attorney Vose, the piece that confounds me in this is the concept of attorney-client privilege, period, regardless of the subject. And if we look at attorney-client privilege, that isn't something that a third party can determine on behalf of an individual. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mayor, council member, yeah. So in this situation, I'm the attorney for the city. Any advice that I give to the city, put aside who the city is for a second, but any advice I give to the city is confidential, attorney-client privileged advice that only the client, the city, can elect to waive. So the city, when it gets advice from its attorney, whoever it may be, has the decision of whether it wants to release that information. It's not for the attorney to decide. So let's understand it is entirely not my call and has not been my call in the past when the council is elected to waive privilege. Then, council member, to your point, who is the client is what you're asking. In some cases, the client is the city manager. The city manager asks for advice about her duties or her authorities. The city attorney may weigh in on that. She is acting as the chief administrator for the city, and so she's getting advice. Other cases, the city council is the city for purposes of getting advice. In this case, the advice was given to the manager, but I think has been now shared with the council. And so the city, I think, is both the manager and the council. It's for the manager and the council together to discuss, which I think you're going to do now, whether you, the city, want to waive the privilege.
Well, and so my point, I don't believe it's correct. There isn't any body or any individual that can direct another individual to waive their own attorney-client privilege. Having this body vote seems to me to be out of order. That if there is a vote that's going to take place, it has to be unanimous to waive attorney-client privilege, or any one individual can nullify it, because the individual's rights outweigh the group in this case.
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, I guess if we're talking about the council as being the city for purposes of receiving attorney-client privilege advice, it's the city council that's receiving the advice, and the city council can act by a majority of a quorum. So, and I understand that that may not be what is the preference of some council members, but that's the case on all votes you take. You may take votes where somebody's on the not prevailing side, and what you wanted to have happen doesn't happen. So I'm not aware of any distinction for attorney-client privilege and waiver of that privilege.
In other words, it doesn't require a unanimous vote. It's a typical 3-2 majority.
Mayor, yeah, I have heard this for the first time, the theory, but no, I'm not aware of a reason why a council decision to waive the privilege would require a unanimous vote.
All right. Councilmember Crowley, any further comments?
Not at this time.
Well, I'd like to add that when it came to waiving privilege on when the city manager had the city attorney write that privilege or attorney-client privilege memo regarding my conflict, this council voted to waive that, and I actually voted for that also. I don't have a problem with this. Given the nature of this issue, and given the email that I received that basically said, look, all of this has been discussed publicly, I don't see any harm whatsoever in waiving privilege on this, because I really do believe that the residents of Victoria have every right to see what's been going on, have the ability that if in fact we've discussed everything in the memo publicly anyways, there's no further harm in waiving privilege and allow the public to read these memos for themselves and draw their own conclusions for that. And given the fact that we've applied one standard to me when that attorney-client privilege was waived and that memo was released, I think we should use that same standard and waive privilege on this. Council members, any further comments?
Yeah, I would like to hear from Mr. Vos on why everybody gets to weigh in on this, why no one has a conflict of interest.
Well, Mayor and council members, I guess as Lori's staff memo indicates, she indicates the city attorney and I do not see a conflict of interest. It says that because we don't. I don't see a conflict of interest. I have said, I think, in the past that I agree with council members Crowley and Striegel, who have themselves declared that they have a conflict on whether to reimburse their legal defense costs. They've indicated that they have that conflict. I haven't carefully analyzed that. I don't think I need to. I agree with that. They have a conflict. The mayor had said the same thing originally, and I said at that time that I agreed with it. He then changed his view on that with the input from outside counsel. I was asked to look at it more carefully, and I disagree. I've said that. I don't agree that he does not have a conflict. I think he does have a conflict. On this issue, I don't see why the mayor or either of the council member defendants in the litigation, they may have a conflict on the issue of whether to pay legal defense costs. That's quite different than the question of whether the city as an entity ought to release attorney-client privilege memos that deal, yes, with that question, but don't answer that question. I mean, these memos, you have them. Those memos don't say anything about whether the manager should pay or not. That's not the attorney's decision to make, and those memos don't speak to that. So the issue upon which the three members are conflicted isn't addressed in these memos. The issue of whether the manager has authority is addressed. The issue of what would constitute the council, whether the two of you, non-conflicted members, could take action or not, that issue is addressed. But those are not issues that the council members have conflicts on. And so the bottom line issue, should the city waive privilege and make these documents available, I don't know why any of the three council members would have a conflict on that. They serve the public here as leaders of the city, and on behalf of the city, they need to decide along with you whether the release of the memos will cause a problem for the city or might cause a problem for the city. So I just don't see, maybe you could state it, what you think the conflict is, but I don't even see a potential conflict on deciding that issue.
Well, like I said, I see them very, very closely related. We didn't all five decide to send a letter to the Attorney General, even though that's what we did, and something like that certainly could have been decided then by the whole body. This issue, this is the advice that the city manager is using to pay the invoices, and those invoices are directly invoiced to Councilman Striegel and Councilman Crowley. So I personally, I see them tied at the hip, but that's just my opinion.
I'm getting a bit confused here, and I apologize, Councilmember Gregory. This is not an intent to single you out, but just to gain some clarity. The opening comments that you made regarding the Public Works building and the City Hall and this decision or this feeling that there were decisions made, we're not redoing the trial here.
No, I'm just saying that.
Excuse me, if I could, please. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
And I don't think a vocal minority reflects or in any way indicates that that is the widespread view of the community. In fact, as with all of the closed sessions of the council that were not secret meetings, that were duly recorded by court reporter, so there's official public minutes, and they're released when they're no longer subject to the reasons it was closed, so will these memos when the time is right. But I think the fact that the city has been directly threatened with litigation is all the argument you need without any discussion of the topic to maintain privilege of documents related to it.
Mayor, so if I may, just to follow up on that point, I agree with the point you just made. Mayor, you'd said that there's a double standard with respect to the memo about York.
No,
released by the council.
I said there's a single standard applied two different ways.
Councilmember Striegel. Going back, I mean, that certainly was relevant because there was, and maybe you didn't see it because you were sitting on the council, but I saw it as a member of the public. I saw a definite perception that this whole deal was magically coming together. We were dealing with the same family on.
Can we just
Point of order. Point of order.
This is very much on topic. We are talking about a perception.
Hang on a second, let him finish.
It is the perception of the public that matters. And if we vote no on this, the perception of the public is that we are hiding something. And that is very real. And it's that perception that could spurn a lawsuit. That perception of lack of transparency. If we vote no, it appears that we're hiding something. And that in and of itself could trigger a lawsuit. And that is very much relevant.
One at a time. All right, go ahead, please.
But Councilmember Gregory, you just said you've seen the memos and there's nothing in there that hasn't been publicly disclosed. And so I think your expression of either confidence or lack of confidence may have some weight in the public's impression. And I think if you seek to create a lack of confidence, you can add to that. There's no doubt in my mind. But spurning a lawsuit, it's already been threatened. How is it that you look that aside and say, let's just waive privilege and open up the liability? And you make comment that you're not an attorney, so you don't know, but yet you tell us that our city attorney is wrong. So I'm curious where that line is.
I didn't say the city attorney was wrong. I just said I disagree. There's difference of thoughts of opinion. There just are. You can have a difference of opinion, and I do think that transparency in this case is a better option. Because I mean, we're going to get opinions. We're going to get these memos analyzed, and we're going to get probably attorneys weighing in, and they'll throw us case law. We've been pretty good at reading case law all year long, and a lot of them are full of hyperbole, and we can weed that out. We can weed out the difference between fact and hyperbole. I think we've been pretty good at that.
And I think the key point has already been made a number of times by a number of the council members. All of this is in the public. The city's not at risk anymore for a lawsuit if we actually release the memos. And I think it's full transparency and allow the public to read these for themselves and to make up their own mind. If we've already talked about everything and there's nothing new in it, what's the harm in releasing it? I don't see any risk whatsoever to the city. I think that's, in fact, a red herring. If we've already discussed this, as was stated by the city manager in her note, correct?
Yeah, when you're done, I'd like to comment.
So I don't see any issue whatsoever. I don't see any additional liability for releasing these and let the public look at them for themselves. And in fact, I want to make sure that we get this and I understand this correctly. These are the same memos that I've been asking for months that were just delivered last week for the first time to me, correct?
That's correct, Mayor.
Correct. These were written in 2016. I started to ask about this in the last council meeting. Who actually saw these memos before last Thursday, I think, when you distributed them to this current council? Didn't everybody see them in 2016? Is that an accurate statement?
I don't know. It's something that I could look into verifying. That's not something that you've communicated to me. You wanted me to confirm, and I wouldn't want to speculate now.
Okay.
I think this I haven't spoken, so I want to
Go ahead.
sneak in a few sentences. First of all, this is hugely bad precedent. And, we've been talking about litigation every meeting for a year, longer than that. So the idea that we don't have any danger from litigation is ridiculous. I think there's litigators waiting to pounce every corner we go around. Just based on our experience, we've just gone through this bad experience, and I think it would be a bad precedent. The threats are real. They've been made more than once. I can't see that we would want to waive attorney-client privilege at this time. Maybe 6 months from now or a year from now, I don't know. But I'm not in favor of waiving attorney-client privilege. I'd also like to understand the double standard. Mr. Vos, you were about to expound on the explanation of the so-called double standard. I would like to hear more about that.
Well, Mayor and Council, it's been said already. I was just going to reiterate what's already been said. The difference, the same standard applied in different ways or two different standards, however you want to say it, doesn't exist. The reason is because the memo that I was asked to prepare with respect to the mayor's conflict was not prepared in an environment where there was any threat in litigation about whether the mayor had a conflict or not. It was simply to advise the city council and the city manager about whether the mayor had a conflict or not. That's quite different than the memos that you have in front of you that are attorney-client privileged. They were prepared after Mr. Kildow, representing folks that were threatening to sue the city, had sent letters to the city threatening litigation. So my practice, Lori can speak for herself, but my practice is when I advise a client about threatened litigation, I would not advise the client to release that. That's standard practice among attorneys involved in things that might lead to litigation. I don't think that's unusual advice.
Well, I'll just say that I totally disagree with that. I don't think there's any risk whatsoever to the city. If we've already discussed all of this publicly, why not let the public see them? Lori, you said you wanted to have a comment?
If the council would like, I've made a recommendation that the city council not waive privilege on this, and I can expound on what I've represented as the belief that there is a legal risk, but I don't want to bog us down if...
The council?
I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Go ahead then, Lori.
Okay, thank you. So I've recommended that you not waive privilege on these documents, and as has been stated several times here tonight, it's not because the contents of that represent a new or different risk to the city. Those memos were written in the context of threatened litigation, but they were meant to be subject to attorney-client privilege. They weren't meant to be introduced in a court of law. I believe in the email when I conveyed these to you, I used some quotes. We operate differently when we're in front of a court of law than we would in the real world. And so looking at having these memos used against us in a future litigation, we might choose to say things differently. We might expound on something differently. And we wouldn't want our defense strategy to be limited to the way that we specifically said something. If we had been doing that, those memos would probably be 50 or 100 pages long because we'd be trying to think of everything. So I just want to clarify that I understand on the face of it, it seems very much like transparency should win out and the memo should be available to the public. And if we were just simply operating in the real world and we were not trying to imagine being in a court and how we are subject to different sets of rules, then that probably would be true. But given that we are facing threatened litigation as recently, that threat of litigation was reiterated as recently as July of this year. So, I'm still under the impression that that's a real threat. That's the advice that I'm offering to the City Council.
For the record, I agree with your advice.
One more question. Have we paid the last invoice to Anthony Oslin?
We have not.
Do you have an... I'll get off. No, I won't go further.
All right, at this point, I move that we waive privilege on the two memos. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
No.
It does not pass. Transparency dies. All right.
That was unacceptable, Mr. Mayor.
You got that. It was disapproved on a 3-2 vote, right? Okay.
Decorum, sir.
Next item, recap of special meeting. Ben?
Just a few things from the special meeting that we held last Monday that I think from a staff perspective, we just wanted to kind of get back kind of a short summary to you all, make sure that what we heard and some of the conclusions made are kind of where the council left the meeting as well, now that you've had some time to reflect on what the discussion was like, the topic, the opportunity. Just want to make sure that we're capturing moving forward as other opportunities might come forward, how we should act or what types of things staff should be ready to present to council. So really quickly on this slide, again, just identifying the intent of the workshop was to look at that RFP opportunity that Amazon had put out. Outcome, clearly the council found that that was not the appropriate project for the city. I think there was a lot of discussion about how an opportunity to further commercial business opportunities in the city of Victoria would certainly be something the council would want to consider. But this particular RFP, given the magnitude, scale of that project, just didn't seem to align with some of the fit that council viewed the residents having if we were to move forward. So ultimately not directing staff to pursue a response to that RFP. Some other things I think in general, what we said a multitude of times throughout the conversation is even though we came initially to talk about that Amazon RFP, there were other reasons why having that type of discussion was very valuable for this group and I think staff as well. So a few things that we've pulled away, and again, please correct us or rephrase if you find appropriate. But I think the entire council just reiterated a desire for the area near County Roads 11 and 10 to be targeted as a commercial or employment district in the future. I think they're, coupling that with some other bullet points that we'll get to. The fact that we're going through this comprehensive plan process, I think we at a staff level heard loud and clear that you want to keep that as a topic of conversation through that exercise of going through the comprehensive plan and certainly looking at that opportunity to help diversify our tax base from being predominantly residential in nature. The other thing I believe that we heard loud and clear, staff to continue to stay engaged with some of those state agencies that were involved in this Amazon RFP. I know that we outlined that night that certainly just having a discussion with representative from Greater MSP led to kind of some conclusion on their end that there's maybe some more follow-up just to understand where we're headed as a community and some of these other opportunities and what they do for our region or our area that might be different from positions we've been in previously. So we do intend to continue to follow up with those agencies as opportunities present themselves. The other part that got a little bit of traction was certainly just this idea of having kind of a market piece once we've identified what that vision for our next forefront of commercial or employment tax base looks like, that the council seemed to be saying to staff as we go through this comprehensive planning process, if there's opportunity to certainly not misdirect our efforts on completing the comp plan, but if there are ways to layer in some of that marketing piece so that the city can actively pursue people to realize whatever that final commercial area looks like, that's at least what we were taking away from the conversation. Also think that council, although the topic was maybe a little bit too big for our community, so to speak, I got a lot of positive feedbacks from just about everyone at the table saying it was a good way to work through what that opportunity was. I think the workshop format seemed to be preferred. So if we're presented with a similar opportunity, not necessarily of the same scale, but another opportunity that maybe is more right fit for Victoria, that workshop format seemed to work pretty well. And then still looking for, as we, again, go through our comprehensive planning process and some other work that staff has been looking into in terms of being in a position to get utilities and other infrastructure down to that area, that council still seemed bought in that we should continue to be lining up information, knowing that once we have everything in terms of costs and an area for water and sewer to go, those will be brought back for physical council action. But looking for staff to kind of continue to assemble the information needed so that if we do have an opportunity, council's in position to act accordingly.
Thank you. Council, comments?
Ben, did you say we were going to put together a formal letter to the Greater MSP and Deeds?
We did talk about whether or not a general letter of support, not necessarily saying that Victoria was the place per se, but there was, I think, some way in that if that starts to become something that the Greater MSP group is looking for, that letter would be put together.
Okay.
The deadline to Amazon for the state to submit is October 15th, so we could have that on our October 9th agenda and would probably have more information about what that proposal moving forward is at that time.
Right, but I wasn't speaking exclusively for Amazon, but other types of those things, corporate headquarters, just to let them know that we're out there, we have the space, we would be interested.
This opened up a dialogue that we need to keep at. We need to have this dialogue regularly and talk about the corridor at County Road 10 and 11. And this is not a new concept. It comes out of the old comprehensive plan, which was put together, 2010?
2009. Yep.
2009. So 2009, that we designated this as a major commercial corridor. So, I mean, we're just zeroing in on something that was put in writing a long time ago. But we need to keep talking about it because we'll get smarter a lot quicker if we keep discussing this and have these kind of workshops. A good example would be the sewer issue. Well, on the surface, it looks like it costs us $4 million to push the sewer down there. But would the sewer be adequate? If you put 50,000 workers down there, and we obviously wouldn't because that's why we didn't consider this, but if you put 25,000 workers down there who are using toilets every day, really do we have this all figured out? And the answer is probably not. So we need to get smarter, quicker, and keep talking about this.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to kind of echo your comments, Councilmember Vogt, and say, in 2010 or 2011, when I first became part of this conversation, there were so many obstacles to getting down to that intersection of 10 and 11 in terms of getting utilities there that could support any kind of commercial development and realizing that kind of comp plan. And now here we are in 2017, and it's kind of a short putt from here. The variables have been dramatically reduced. The distance is dramatically reduced, and it is on the horizon where we can start thinking about what should it be and what shouldn't it be. And my only other comment is really just kudos to the staff. I think it was pretty impressive how much you pulled together quickly, and I think our meeting last Monday night was just a great example of how what we can, not necessarily get done because we didn't move forward, but it helped us focus on collectively what Victoria is, what our values, what our differentiation is as a community, and our opportunities for our community, and kind of what we are and what we're not, but maybe equally important, what we want to be going forward. And I think the process, including engaging the regional and the state agencies that you did on that short notice, created visibility and opportunities that will be realized in the future. So again, my thanks and kudos to the work that you and the staff did.
That was my understanding from our meeting. I think the question was asked, are we going to submit a letter to the regional authority? I came away from the meeting with the understanding that the reason for doing that was to continue to promote the relationship between the City of Victoria, and that letter was not required because this process in and of itself has you in conversations with them, and that is what is needed, is the conversation going forward. So my understanding is we don't need a letter. You're engaged, and it's keeping you engaged. And I do want to compliment staff too. That is an example of how all of our meetings should be. And to the extent that we can stay focused on the betterment of Victoria, this council can do great things. There will be an opportunity sometime in the future, hopefully in the near future, for large development in that area. And we need to be prepared. And this is a great city. It's a great opportunity for a company to come here. It will happen. Thank you.
Council, further comments? Okay, Lori, reports.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to highlight tonight, Mayor and Council, is that we do have a joint meeting with the Park and Rec Committee and the Planning Commission scheduled for October 16th at 7 p.m. to discuss the ongoing work of the comp plan. And I know that's on all of your calendars and it's published on our website, but just another opportunity to highlight that for anyone that's interested in attending. That's all I have tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bob?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Corolli? Reports?
Nothing.
Councilmember Striegel?
Comment, I guess. The CCSO report is attached, Carver County Sheriff's Office, and it gives a breakdown of the August calls and activity. And I find it very interesting, and I kind of like the charts and graphs. What I find would make it even more valuable would to see it in a trend-wise fashion. So is the total number of calls here trending up or trending down? Is the distribution of the types of calls changing in any significant way? Being that there's a number of different elements in here which could include medical things. Do we need any difference in our fire department staffing or readiness or equipment based on what we're seeing here? And then with 24/7 coverage now, which is great, I could see how that would impact the numbers as well. Is increased visibility reducing the amount of illegal activity, or are we finding more of it because we have more eyes out there? It'd just be really good to kind of get a view of what is it that's, as we're changing. And also, I think when we added deputy, we talked about a lot of community engagement programs that we maybe used to have or desired to have but didn't have the staffing. So I think it would be very helpful for the council and the citizens to see kind of with the new deputy on staff what some of those things are that we'll be undertaking.
Yeah, that's great. If I could offer one quick comment, we can definitely work with the sheriff's office to provide more trend information. But just this morning, I was talking to Deputy Gerber, and as you know, we've had a lot of concerns about speed on Marsh Lake Road. The council was able to act to implement a rural speed limit of 35 miles an hour, but we always had that gap in police coverage between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m., and then again from 4:30 to 6. Made it tough to really get out there at the times when residents really wanted us to be there. And over the last, I think we're only going on about 2 weeks that we've had the 24/7 coverage. But our deputies have been able to spend significant amount of time down there doing educations and citations as warranted. And Kara and I have both gotten some feedback that residents have appreciated seeing that already.
Great, thank you.
That's a temporary speed limit, right?
It's a temporary speed limit until the road is improved. That's correct.
Was there anything else?
I have one question, and it's I want to pick my words carefully so that they are said in the most respectful manner. And this has to do with the reports themselves. And Mr. Mayor, you indicated that you would be posting your reports to a website rather than presenting them here. And so I guess thinking about it as a discussion area, I guess I'd like to understand how you would like us to engage with your reports.
However you feel is appropriate. I'm not opposed to having discussions about them, but I didn't think it was, after doing a few of them, I didn't think it was effective use of the council time, which is why I was going to post them online when I have reports. But I don't think I've done a report in the last meeting, and I didn't have one for tonight. So there's not necessarily going to be a report every time. But
Can I ask, is that your ongoing intent is to continue to when you do have a report, to present them through your website as opposed to bringing them to council?
Correct. I may highlight points here, and then we can discuss it at the council meeting. I'm not opposed to that, but I don't want to take 20 minutes reading in and going through a bunch of details. So maybe highlights here in the council meeting, details can be found on that website.
Thank you.
Yep. Councilmember Vogt?
The Finance Committee focused on preparing and approving the numbers for the levy. So there was a lot of work coming out of the Finance Department and the Finance Committee to come up with the presentation and the levy that was presented tonight.
Okay. Is that all?
Yes.
Councilmember Gregory?
No report.
And I have no report. So at this point, I move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned.